The morning sun rose over New Sol Colony like any other day. 20 million people lived on this world, most of them families who had traveled across the stars to build a new home. The buildings were tall and bright, the streets were clean, and children played in parks while their parents worked in offices and factories. Daho Kim walked through the central plaza with his younger sister Youngmi, laughing at something she said about her patients at the hospital. He was a sergeant in Earth's Green Berets, home on leave for the first time in 8 months. Youngmi worked as a doctor in the colony's main medical center. She was kind and always smiling, the type of person who made everyone around her feel better. Daho had joined the military to protect people like her. People who built things instead of destroying them. People who healed instead of hurt. "You worry too much, big brother," Youngmi said, nudging his shoulder. "We're safe here. The defense platforms protect us. Nobody would dare attack Earth's colonies." Daho wanted to believe her. The galaxy had been mostly peaceful since humans entered the larger community of alien civilizations. Trade flourished. Diplomatic relations grew stronger every year. Most species saw humans as friendly and open, maybe even a little naive. But Daho had trained for war his entire adult life. He knew that peace was fragile. In orbit above the colony, the Vraxel fleet arrived in complete silence. 30 warships materialized from faster-than-light travel, their weapons already charging. The defense platforms detected them immediately and sent emergency signals to Earth. But the platforms were designed to defend against pirates and small threats, not a full military assault. Within minutes, the Vraxel destroyed every orbital defense. The explosions lit up the sky like new stars. Daho was buying fruit at a market stall when the first bombardment hit. The ground shook so hard the buildings cracked and people fell to their knees. He looked up and saw fire falling from the sky. Orbital strikes were hitting the industrial sector, the spaceport, the military installations. Then they started hitting residential areas. Youngmi grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with terror. "Get to the emergency shelters," Daho shouted at the crowd. People were screaming and running in every direction. He tried to keep Youngmi close, but the chaos was overwhelming. Another strike hit 3 blocks away, and the shockwave knocked them both down. When Daho stood up, his ears were ringing and blood ran down his face from a cut above his eye. The bombardment lasted for 40 minutes. When it finally stopped, half the colony was on fire. Buildings had collapsed into rubble. The beautiful parks were now craters. The screaming never stopped. Youngmi pulled Daho toward the hospital, saying there would be wounded people who needed help. He followed her, his military training taking over. He had no weapon, no way to contact his unit, no way to fight back. All he could do was help survivors. That's when the Vraxel troops landed. Their ships came down through the smoke and flames, deploying thousands of soldiers in heavy armor. They were tall creatures with 4 arms and thick, scaled skin. Their eyes were cold and emotionless. They moved through the streets in organized formations, weapons ready. Daho watched from a collapsed building as they approached a group of civilians huddled near a fountain. He started to move toward them, to warn them, but Youngmi held him back. "There's too many," she whispered. "We can't help them." The Vraxel opened fire. The civilians didn't even have time to run. Daho closed his eyes, but he couldn't block out the sound. Youngmi sobbed quietly beside him. They waited until the aliens moved on, then ran toward the hospital. They needed to get to the shelters underground. They needed to survive. The Vraxel were systematic in their slaughter. They went building to building, shelter to shelter, hunting down every human they could find. Their leader, War Master Kralveth, watched from his command ship with satisfaction. Humans had seemed so weak in all the intelligence reports. They talked about peace and cooperation. They offered aid to struggling worlds. They avoided conflict whenever possible. Clearly, they were a species that would break easily. This attack would send a message to all of humanity: surrender or face extinction. Day-Ho and Young Mi reached the hospital and found it burning. Dozens of wounded people lay in the streets, calling for help. Young Mi immediately ran to them, checking injuries, trying to stop bleeding. Day-Ho helped her move people to a partially collapsed parking structure that offered some cover. They worked for hours, saving who they could. But the Vraxel kept coming. A patrol found them as the sun began to set. 6 alien soldiers turned the corner and saw the humans hiding in the structure. Day-Ho put himself between them and Young Mi. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but his bare hands. The Vraxel didn't hesitate. They raised their rifles. Young Mi pushed past Day-Ho and stood in front of him instead. "Please," she said, holding up her hands. "We're doctors. We're helping wounded people. We're not soldiers." The Vraxel leader tilted his head, studying her. Then he shot her in the chest. Young Mi fell backward into Day-Ho's arms. He caught her, lowering her gently to the ground. She looked up at him with confused eyes, blood spreading across her white medical coat. "Big brother," she whispered. Then she stopped breathing. Day-Ho looked up at the Vraxel soldiers. Something in his expression made them pause. They had seen fear in human faces all day, panic, desperation. But this was different. This was cold and empty and infinitely dangerous. One of the aliens moved forward to finish him, but their leader called them back. They had orders to maximize casualties, not waste time with individual humans. They moved on, leaving Day-Ho alone with his sister's body. He sat there in the dark, holding Young Mi, while the massacre continued around him. 3 hours later, the Vraxel finished their work. 20 million humans were dead. The aliens celebrated their victory and began broadcasting images across the galaxy, expecting the rest of humanity to surrender in terror. They had made a terrible mistake. They thought they had attacked civilians and won a great victory. What they had actually done was give Earth's warriors a reason to show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of when someone they loved was murdered. The first hour after the massacre was chaos. Captain Sung-Min Lee floated in the wreckage of the orbital defense platform, his emergency suit keeping him alive in the vacuum of space. He had watched the entire attack through his helmet display, powerless to stop it. The platform's weapons were destroyed in the first minutes of the assault. He sent every piece of information he could to Earth Command before the station exploded around him. Troop numbers, ship positions, tactical formations. Everything that might help someone, anyone, strike back. His escape pod tumbled through space, automated distress beacon pulsing in the darkness. Through the small window, he could see new soul colony burning on the planet below. His wife worked as a teacher there. His 2 sons attended the school where she taught. Sung-Min knew with absolute certainty that they were dead. He didn't cry. There would be time for tears later. Right now, he needed to survive so he could make the Vraxel pay. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath Colorado, the United Earth Council sat in stunned silence. The screens showed footage from the Vraxel themselves, proudly broadcast across known space. Streets filled with bodies, buildings burning, execution squads moving through the ruins. The aliens were celebrating, drinking captured human alcohol, posing for pictures with their weapons beside piles of corpses. General Park sat at the head of the table, his weathered face carved from stone. He had fought in 3 wars before humanity reached the stars. He knew what combat looked like. This wasn't combat. This was extermination. The politicians around the table were arguing about diplomatic responses, economic sanctions, appeals to the Galactic Council. The general listened to them debate for exactly 5 minutes. Then he stood up and walked out. He went directly to Special Operations Command. The building was already buzzing with activity. Every operator on Earth had seen the footage. They knew people on New Sol Colony, friends, family, loved ones. The Green Berets were packing their gear before anyone gave them orders. 12 teams, 144 of the most dangerous humans ever trained, volunteered within the hour. Nobody asked permission. Nobody waited for approval. Master Sergeant Hyan Wu Nam loaded magazines into his vest with mechanical precision. His parents had retired to New Sol Colony 3 years ago. They sent him messages every week, telling him about their garden, about the neighbors, about how peaceful life was there. The last message arrived 2 days ago. His mother complained that the tomatoes weren't growing well. His father made a joke about finally learning to cook. Hyan Wu saved every message. He played them sometimes when he couldn't sleep. Now there would be no more messages. Staff Sergeant Bar Kang cleaned her rifle and steady practiced movements. She had grown up on Earth, but spent summers on New Sol with her grandparents. They taught her to speak Korean properly, to cook traditional food, to honor her ancestors. She became a sniper because her grandfather told her stories about defending his village during the old wars. He said every generation had people who protected others. Bara chose to be one of those people. Now, her grandparents were dead, killed by aliens who thought humans were soft targets. Lieutenant Minho Ru worked in the intelligence section, downloading every piece of information about the Vraxel military, their command structure, their weapons, their tactics, their weaknesses. He found something interesting in the intercepted communications. The Vraxel had studied human culture by watching entertainment broadcasts. They thought the shows represented reality. They saw humans negotiating, compromising, showing mercy to enemies. They concluded that humans lacked the will to fight. Minho printed out a document from Earth's military history, the Geneva Conventions, rules of warfare designed to protect civilians and prisoners. He highlighted one section and posted it on the wall of the briefing room. It said that protections only applied to enemy combatants who followed the same rules. The Vraxel had massacred 20 million non-combatants. The Geneva Conventions did not apply to them. Daeho Kim arrived at the base 4 hours after Young Mi died. A rescue ship found him still holding her body in the ruins of the hospital. They had to physically pull him away from her. He didn't speak during the entire flight to Earth. He walked off the shuttle, covered in blood and ash, and went straight to the armory. He signed out his weapons, his gear, his equipment. Then he sat down and methodically prepared everything for combat. A young officer approached him, someone from administration. "Sergeant Kim, you just survived a traumatic event. You should see medical. Talk to someone. Take time to process what happened." Daeho looked at him with empty eyes. "I'll process it after." "After what?" "After they're all dead." The officer backed away. He had seen that look before in veterans of the worst conflicts. It was the look of someone who had gone beyond anger, beyond rage, beyond any emotion except cold purpose. It was the look of a man who had become a weapon, the insertion craft loaded in near silence. The operators checked each other's gear, running through pre-combat routines they had practiced 10,000 times. They painted their faces with camouflage, then added ash from the colony that someone had brought back. Each man and woman carried soil from New Sol, mixed with the ashes of the dead. They rubbed it into their skin like war paint. The pilots were the best in Earth's fleet, specialists in stealth insertion. They would fly through Vraxel sensors undetected, using technology that bent light and absorbed radar. The trip would take exactly 1 hour through slip space, that strange dimension between normal reality where distances collapsed. 1 hour to reach New Sol. 5 hours total since the last civilian died. On the colony, the Vraxel were settling in for occupation. They set up command posts in the former government buildings. They established perimeter patrols. They sent reports back to the Vraxel Empire claiming total victory. War Master Krolveth composed a message to the human government, demanding immediate surrender of all frontier colonies or face similar attacks. He was quite pleased with himself. The Vraxel intelligence officers studied human military capabilities. They noted that Earth had soldiers, yes, but nothing compared to Vraxel might. Human ships were smaller. Human weapons were less powerful. Humans had been spacefaring for less than a century, while the Vraxel Empire had conquered worlds for millennia. The intelligence assessment concluded that humans would require a ground invasion if they refused to surrender, but it would be quick and easy. Humans simply did not have warrior culture. This assessment was based on watching human entertainment and studying human diplomacy. The Vraxel had never seen what humans did to those who murdered their families. They had never studied Earth's military history. They didn't know about the wars humans fought against each other, the brutal conflicts that shaped every culture on the planet. They didn't understand that humans had more words for types of killing than most species. Had for colors. The insertion craft entered New Sol's atmosphere at precisely 5 hours and 12 minutes after the massacre ended. The pods scattered across the colony perimeter, landing in ruins that provided perfect cover. 144 operators emerged in the darkness, invisible to Vraxel sensors, ghosts in the smoke and ash of their destroyed home. They moved through terrain they knew intimately. These weren't strangers fighting on foreign soil. These were people defending their home, moving through streets where they had walked with friends and family. Every burned building held memories. Every body they passed in the darkness was someone's mother, father, sister, brother, child. The Vraxel sentries never saw them coming. The first Vraxel died at exactly 11:47 in the evening. He stood watch on the eastern perimeter, bored and confident. His name was Kreltok, and he had killed 17 humans during the massacre. He thought it was glorious work. Easy. The humans barely fought back. Now he stood guard over the ruins, expecting no trouble. The human military was surely scrambling to respond, but that would take days. Weeks. Perhaps Ba'ura Kang watched him through her rifle scope from 800 meters away. She had been lying in the rubble of what used to be a school for 90 minutes, barely breathing, absolutely still. The Vraxel had 4 arms and thick armor, but she had spent the last 5 hours studying their physiology from Captain Sungmin's intelligence reports. There were weak points, joints, the area where the helmet met the neck seal. The visual sensors on their helmets. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle coughed once, the suppressor turning the shot into a sound no louder than someone coughing. 800 meters away, Kreltok's head snapped back. He fell without a sound. His partner, standing 50 meters away, turned at the motion. Ji Woo Park's weapon whispered from another angle. The second Vraxel dropped. Daeho and 2 others emerged from the shadows. They moved like smoke, utterly silent. They dragged both bodies into the ruins of a collapsed store. They took the Vraxel weapons and communication devices. Then they vanished back into the darkness. 2 minutes from first shot to complete disappearance. 0 alarms raised. This pattern repeated across the colony. The Green Berets had split into small teams, each assigned a sector. They didn't attack in force. They hunted. A patrol would walk down a street, and suddenly one soldier would fall. Then another. The rest would spin around, searching for threats, and find nothing. Sometimes they survived long enough to call for help. Usually they didn't. The Vraxel had approximately 8,000 troops in the colony, supported by armored walkers and air support. Against a conventional assault, they would be nearly impossible to dislodge. But the Green Berets didn't fight conventionally. They had trained for years in unconventional warfare, learning how to fight when outnumbered, outgunned, and operating behind enemy lines. This was exactly the scenario they prepared for. Hyan-Wu Nam led a team through the ruins of the residential district. He knew every street here. His parents' house was 6 blocks away. He had already been there. The house was burned. He found their bodies in what used to be the garden, where his mother complained about the tomatoes. He didn't look at them for long. He covered them with a blanket from inside and left. There would be time to grieve later. His team encountered a Vraxel patrol near midnight. 5 enemy soldiers, moving in standard formation, sweeping the area with thermal sensors. The sensors were useless. The Green Berets had coated their uniforms with thermal masking gel and wrapped themselves in debris that matched the ambient temperature. They were invisible to the Vraxel technology. The patrol walked past Hyan-Wu's position, close enough that he could have reached out and touched them. He let them pass. Then he and his team rose from the rubble behind them. The Vraxel never heard a thing. Knives were silent. So were hands that knew exactly how to break a neck. 5 Vraxel went down in less than 10 seconds. Hyan-Wu checked each body, confirming kills. Then his team stripped them of weapons and communication gear and melted back into the ruins. By 3 in the morning, the Vraxel had lost over 200 soldiers. Small patrols were disappearing. Sentries were found dead at their posts. Communication relays were going offline. War Master Kralveth was starting to realize something was very wrong. He called his officers together for an emergency meeting. How many humans survived the cleansing? He demanded. Our estimates suggest no more than a few hundred scattered survivors, one officer reported. Mostly hiding in deep shelters or remote areas. They pose no threat. Then explain how we are losing soldiers to these no threats, Kralveth growled. Nobody had a good answer. The Vraxel sent investigation teams to check on missing patrols. They found bodies with crushed skulls, throats cut with surgical precision, necks broken at angles that suggested impossible strength. But no bullet wounds, no explosions, no signs of heavy combat. Just silent, efficient death. The investigators reported their findings with growing unease. This wasn't combat. This was assassination. Methodical, professional, terrifying. Whatever was killing, Vraxel soldiers was doing it without making noise, without leaving evidence, without being detected by any sensors. Kralveth ordered a full security lockdown. All patrols were to move in groups of 20 or more. All soldiers were to maintain constant communication. Air support would provide overwatch. The armored walkers would patrol key areas. He was confident these measures would solve the problem. They didn't at dawn. Hyan-Wu's team found a Vraxel fire team taking shelter in the burned hospital where Youngmi had died. The aliens had chosen the location because it offered good cover and strong defensive positions. They had 20 soldiers, heavy weapons, and a clear view of all approaches. By any military standard, they were secure. The Green Berets attacked from 3 directions simultaneously. They had spent the last hour placing shaped charges at structural weak points. When Hyan-Wu triggered the explosives, entire walls collapsed on the Vraxel positions. The aliens scattered, confused and disoriented. That's when the operators moved in. The fight lasted 90 seconds. The Vraxel had better armor and weapons, but they were fighting in rubble that the humans knew intimately. Every pile of debris provided cover. Every collapsed wall created a firing position. The Green Berets moved through the chaos like dancers, each step precise, each shot counted. When the dust settled, 20 Vraxel lay dead. The human team had 0 casualties. Hyan-Wu stood over the last Vraxel, who was wounded and trapped under debris. The alien looked up at him with 4 eyes wide with fear. He was trying to say something, words in broken English. Mercy, please. Geneva, rules, civilian protections. Hyan-Wu knelt down beside him. His voice was very quiet and very calm. The Geneva Conventions protect civilians. You killed 20 million civilians yesterday. Those rules don't apply to you anymore." He raised his rifle and brought the stock down. The sound echoed through the ruined hospital. Then Haiyan-Wu and his team vanished into the morning smoke, leaving only bodies behind. By noon, the Vraxel had lost over 400 soldiers. Kralveth was starting to panic. He sent urgent messages to the Vraxel fleet in orbit, demanding reinforcements, demanding orbital support, demanding someone explain how a few scattered survivors were decimating his occupation force. The Vraxel intelligence officers finally accessed Earth's military database. What they found terrified them. Humans didn't just have soldiers. They had warriors. Special operations forces trained in every form of warfare. Units with names like Greenberets, Rangers, SEALs, Commandos. Soldiers who specialized in operating behind enemy lines, outnumbered and outgunned, surviving through skill and ruthlessness. The intelligence reports painted a picture of human history soaked in blood. Thousands of years of warfare. Humans fighting humans with increasing sophistication and brutality. Every culture on Earth had warrior traditions. Every nation maintained elite soldiers. Humans didn't avoid conflict because they were weak. They avoided it because they knew exactly how destructive they could be. Kralveth read the reports with growing horror. The Vraxel had studied human diplomacy and concluded they were soft. They had made a fatal error. They mistook civilization for weakness. They thought mercy meant helplessness. They had attacked humanity's families and expected surrender. Instead, they had awakened something that the humans usually kept carefully controlled. Something that most species never saw because humans tried very hard to be peaceful and civilized. But when humans decided that civilization and mercy no longer applied, when they decided that the enemy had forfeited any right to compassion, they became something else entirely. They became what the Vraxel were now facing in the ruins of New Sol Colony. They became hunters who killed without hesitation, without mercy, without remorse. They became the thing that humans feared in themselves. The capacity for violence that lived in every human heart, usually buried under layers of culture and ethics and law. The Vraxel had killed human civilians and thought it would break humanity's will to fight. Instead, they had removed the only thing that restrained human warriors from unleashing total war. They had killed the people that the soldiers were protecting. Now there was nothing left to do except take revenge. The Vraxel expected a siege. They consolidated their forces into defensive positions, using the colony's former government center as their main base. 8,000 soldiers, armored walkers, air support, and heavy weapons all concentrated in one area. Kralveth was confident this would stop the attacks. Massed forces could defend against anything. He didn't understand asymmetric warfare. The Green Berets didn't want to attack a fortified position. They wanted the Vraxel to gather in one place where they couldn't maneuver, where they were trapped, where they would slowly break under psychological pressure. Minho-Ru sat in a captured Vraxel communications hub, his fingers dancing across alien keyboards. He had spent years learning alien languages and technology. Cracking their encryption took him 40 minutes. Once inside their network, he started broadcasting on every Vraxel frequency. The messages were simple. Names of dead Vraxel soldiers, their unit designations, how they died, where their bodies were found, timestamps of their deaths. The information was precise and detailed. The message was clear. We know exactly who you are. We're watching you, and you're all going to die here. The broadcast played continuously. Every hour, Minho added new names to the list. The Vraxel soldiers heard their friends and squad mates identified one by one. They heard descriptions of how each soldier died. Skull crushed, throat cut, neck broken, shot from long range, killed in their sleep. The list grew longer every hour. The psychological impact was devastating. Raxel morale started to crack. Soldiers stopped sleeping. They jumped at shadows. They argued with their officers. Some refused to go on patrol. The species that had massacred 20 million civilians without hesitation was now terrified of an enemy. They couldn't see and couldn't fight. The Green Berets became ghosts. They struck at dawn and midnight. Never the same pattern twice. Never in the same place. A water treatment facility exploded, cutting off clean water to the Raxel base. A fuel depot burned for 3 days, destroying their reserve supplies. A power generator was sabotaged, plunging half the base into darkness. Jae-sung. Oh, the team's combat medic found wounded Raxel soldiers in the ruins. He treated their injuries with expert care. He stopped bleeding, stabilized fractures, administered medicine. Then he asked them questions. Where was their command post? How many soldiers were in each unit? What were their communication frequencies? When did reinforcements arrive? The Raxel soldiers, grateful to be alive and receiving medical care, answered his questions. They thought perhaps this human was one of the good ones, one of the civilians who valued mercy and compassion. When Jae-sung had all the information he needed, he left them alive in the ruins with enough medical supplies to survive. He wanted them to go back to their lines and tell the others what happened. The wounded soldiers returned to the Raxel base with stories that spread like disease. The humans were ghosts. They could be anywhere. They could kill you or let you live. They knew everything about you. They were playing with the Raxel forces like a cat plays with wounded prey. The fear grew stronger. Captain Sungmin coordinated everything from orbit. His escape pod had been recovered by a stealth ship, and now he operated from a captured Raxel shuttle equipped with advanced sensors. He mapped enemy positions in real time, tracked patrol patterns, identified weak points in their defenses. He fed this information to the teams on the ground through encrypted channels. On the third day, Raxel reinforcements arrived. 5,000 fresh troops landed in dropships, bringing the total occupation force to 13,000. Kralveth was relieved. With these numbers, they could crush any resistance. The reinforcements could hunt down the human survivors while his original forces held defensive positions. The Green Berets let the dropships land. They watched from concealed positions as 5,000 Raxel soldiers disembarked, formed up into columns, and began marching toward the colony. The aliens were confident. They had overwhelming numbers. They were trained soldiers of a galactic empire. How much damage could a few human survivors really do? They found out when they reached the landing zone perimeter. Hyun-woo had spent 2 days mining the approach routes with every explosive he could manufacture or steal. He used Raxel munitions, human demo charges, and improvised devices built from colony equipment. The mines were pressure-triggered, motion-triggered, and remote-detonated. A spider web of death waiting for targets. The Raxel columns walked into the kill zone. Hyun-woo watched through binoculars as they entered the marked area. He waited until the maximum number of soldiers were in position. Then he triggered the first sequence. The ground erupted in fire and shrapnel. Hundreds of Raxel died in the first seconds. The survivors scattered, running directly into secondary explosions. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky ones screamed for hours. When the dust settled, over 1,000 Raxel reinforcements were dead. The survivors fled back toward their landing ships, abandoning equipment and wounded. The Green Berets picked off stragglers from long range, Myra's rifle speaking its quiet language of death. By the time the reinforcements reached Kralveth's base, they had lost nearly 2,000 soldiers. The War Master's relief turned to despair. That night, Miura achieved a shot that would become legendary in military history. Intelligence reported that Kralveth was holding a strategy meeting with his senior officers in a reinforced bunker. The bunker had thick walls and overhead cover. It should have been safe, but the bunker had ventilation slits for air circulation. Bazura threw herself 1,400 meters away on top of a partially collapsed tower. A sandstorm was blowing through the colony, reducing visibility to almost zero. Any reasonable person would say the shot was impossible. Wind, distance, darkness, a target the size of a ventilation slit. Bazura was not a reasonable person. She was a master sniper who had spent 10,000 hours perfecting her craft. She calculated wind speed, adjusted for gravity and the Coriolis effect, accounted for the target's position inside the bunker. Then she controlled her breathing, slowed her heartbeat, and squeezed the trigger 3 times in precise succession. The first bullet went through the ventilation slit, ricocheted off the bunker's interior wall, and struck a Vraxel general in the head. The second bullet followed a fractionally different trajectory and killed the intelligence officer. The third bullet hit Kralveth as second-in-command. 3 shots. 3 kills. 1,400 meters through a sandstorm. Jiwoo's drone captured the entire sequence on video. Minho broadcast it on every Vraxel channel along with a message from Earth Command. You killed 20 million civilians. We're going to kill every soldier you send. This is not war. This is extermination. The video reached the Vraxel homeworld within hours. The Empire's military leadership watched in horror as their best soldiers were systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't even see. The reports from New Seoul painted a nightmare picture. Humans fighting like demons in the ruins of their colony. Humans who knew every building, every street, every hiding place. Humans who refused to engage in direct combat, but instead waged a campaign of terror and assassination. More reports came in from other star systems. Earth's special forces had gone on the offensive everywhere. Vraxel bases were being raided. Supply ships were being ambushed. Officers were being assassinated. The humans weren't fighting a defensive war. They were hunting Vraxel soldiers across multiple worlds simultaneously. By the 5th day on New Seoul colony, the Vraxel had lost over 3,000 soldiers. Morale was completely shattered. Kralveth's remaining officers were begging him to order a retreat. The War Master, his pride and confidence broken, finally agreed. He sent a message to the fleet in orbit. Prepare for full evacuation. All troops would withdraw to the landing ships and leave this cursed world. The order spread through the Vraxel ranks like a wave of relief. Finally, they could leave. Finally, they could escape these ghosts who killed from the shadows. Finally, they would be safe. The Vraxel began their retreat toward the spaceport where their landing ships waited. 10,000 soldiers, armored vehicles, and equipment columns all moving in one direction. They maintained formation and discipline, but everyone could see the fear in their eyes. They just wanted to get off this planet alive. What they didn't know was that the humans had spent 5 days preparing for exactly this moment. The spaceport was where New Seoul civilians had tried to evacuate when the attack began. Thousands of people had died there, cut down by Vraxel weapons as they tried to board rescue ships. The Greenbirds had not forgotten. They had turned a spaceport into a killing ground, and now they waited for the Vraxel to walk into the trap. Daeho Kim stood in the ruins overlooking the landing pads, watching the alien columns approach. He touched the photo of Youngmi in his pocket. Then he picked up his radio and spoke 2 words. Spring it. The first explosion hit the lead Vraxel column at exactly 1400 hours. An armored walker stepped on a buried charge and disappeared in a ball of fire. The blast triggered a chain reaction. More explosives detonated along the road, tearing apart vehicles and soldiers. The Vraxel column scattered, troops running for cover, officers shouting orders that nobody could hear over the explosions. They ran directly into prepared positions. 60 Green Beret operators had spent 5 days turning the spaceport into a maze of overlapping fields of fire. Every approach was covered. Every piece of cover concealed a weapon. Every escape route led into another kill zone. The humans had studied Vraxel tactics for a week. They knew exactly how the aliens would react to each threat. Bora's rifle spoke from a water tower, 800 meters away. A Vraxel officer leading his troops toward cover dropped. Then another. Then a third. She was shooting them in order of rank, removing command structure with surgical precision. Without officers to coordinate them, the Vraxel soldiers became a mob instead of an army. Hyon Wu triggered the secondary charges. Fuel tanks buried under rubble exploded, creating walls of fire that channeled the Vraxel columns into narrow corridors. The aliens pressed forward because they had no choice. Behind them was the city where humans hunted them. Ahead was the spaceport and escape. They had to break through. The Vraxel brought up their armored walkers, massive machines with heavy weapons and thick armor. The walkers opened fire on suspected human positions, raking the ruins with explosive rounds. For the first time in days, the humans took casualties. A Green Beret team was caught in the open when a walker's gun targeted their position. 3 operators died instantly, but the walkers were exactly what Hyon Wu had prepared for. He had positioned anti-armor weapons in a crossfire pattern, hidden among the debris where thermal sensors couldn't detect them. When the walkers advanced, he triggered the ambush. Rockets streaked from 3 directions simultaneously. The first walker exploded. The second lost a leg and crashed to the ground. The third tried to retreat and drove over a buried mine. The Vraxel infantry charged forward, trying to use the confusion to break through. They numbered in the thousands, a wave of armored soldiers with overwhelming firepower. Against any normal defensive position, they would have succeeded through sheer numbers. But this wasn't a normal defense. The Green Berets fought from positions they had prepared and memorized. They moved between firing points, never staying in one place long enough for Vraxel weapons to target them. They used the ruins like a 3-dimensional maze, attacking from unexpected angles, disappearing before counterfire could find them. Every shot counted. Every movement was planned. Ji Wu coordinated the defense from a command post buried in the rubble, tracking enemy movements through a network of cameras and sensors. He called targets to Biora, directed teams to weak points in the Vraxel advance, and kept everyone synchronized. His voice remained calm and professional, even as the battle raged around him. The fight lasted for hours. The sun began to set, painting the burning spaceport in shades of red and orange. The Vraxel kept coming because they had nowhere else to go. Their landing ships were visible on the far side of the spaceport, tantalizingly close. If they could just break through the human defenders, they could escape, but they couldn't break through. Every time they pushed forward, they ran into prepared positions. Every time they found cover, human weapons found them. The Green Berets were outnumbered 166-1, and it didn't matter. They were fighting for their dead families on ground. They knew better than anyone else in the galaxy. As darkness fell, Earth's reinforcements arrived. Rangers fast-roped from helicopters. SEALs emerged from underground tunnels. Commandos from a dozen nations appeared on the Vraxel flanks. The aliens suddenly found themselves surrounded. What had been a desperate retreat became a massacre. The Vraxel lines broke. Soldiers threw down their weapons and tried to surrender. Some humans accepted the surrender. Others didn't. The ones who had lost families on New Sol, who had spent 6 days watching Vraxel celebrate the massacre of 20 million people, those humans didn't stop fighting. They had become something beyond soldiers, beyond warriors. They had become instruments of revenge. Deho moved through the chaos like a ghost. He had stopped thinking hours ago. His body moved on pure training and muscle memory. He killed Vraxel soldiers without hesitation, without emotion, each one bringing him closer to the command center where Kralveth had established his final position. The War Master's bunker was reinforced and heavily defended. His remaining personal guard, the elite of the Vraxel military, surrounded him. They had heavy weapons and the best armor. They were determined to protect their commander, even if it meant dying to the last. Soldier Hyonwoo's team breached the bunker's outer defenses with shaped charges. The explosion tore open the reinforced door, and the green barrets poured inside. The Vraxel guards fought with desperate courage, but courage couldn't stop bullets. The humans moved through the bunker like a machine, each operator covering the others, each shot precise and lethal. Daiho found Kralveth in the command room. The War Master was wounded, bleeding from multiple injuries, surrounded by the bodies of his personal guard. He still held a weapon, but his forearms trembled. He looked at the human sergeant standing in the doorway, covered in dust and blood and ash, and finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. "You were supposed to be weak," Kralveth said, his translator making his voice sound hollow. "Your broadcasts showed compassion, mercy. You negotiated instead of fighting. You were supposed to break when we demonstrated our strength." Daiho walked toward him slowly. He wasn't in a hurry. The War Master wasn't going anywhere. "We have compassion for those who deserve it. We show mercy to those who honor the rules of war. You massacred 20 million civilians. You celebrated it. You thought it would make us afraid." He grabbed the alien's skull with both hands. Kralveth tried to pull away, but he was too weak, too wounded. Daiho's grip was iron. "You showed the galaxy what happens when you murder human families," Daiho said quietly. "You taught them that we have limits to our mercy, that there are lines you don't cross, that when you kill our children, our parents, our brothers and sisters, we stop being diplomats and peacemakers. We become exactly what our ancestors were for thousands of years before we reached the stars." "What is that?" Kralveth whispered. "The most dangerous predator this galaxy has ever seen." The sound of the Vraxel War Master's skull breaking echoed through the bunker. Daiho let the body fall and walked back outside. Around him, the battle was ending. Of the 13,000 Vraxel who had participated in the massacre of New Sol Colony, none would leave the planet alive. Earth's special forces had made that decision on the first day. No survivors. No prisoners. No mercy. The cost was not cheap. 23 Green Berets died in the battle for the spaceport. Ji Woo was among them. He died saving a group of civilian survivors who had been hiding in bunkers for 6 days. A Vraxel ambush caught his team in the open, and Ji Woo threw himself on a grenade to protect the civilians. He was 26 years old. The footage from the battle spread across the galaxy within days. Other species watched in shock as humanity demonstrated what it was truly capable of when pushed beyond all restraint. The Vraxel Empire, seeing its elite forces completely annihilated, sued for peace within a month. They offered reparations, territory, anything to avoid further conflict with humans. The negotiations were cold and brief. Earth's representatives had simple demands. All Vraxel military forces would withdraw from human space. The Empire would pay for rebuilding New Sol Colony. The officers responsible for ordering the massacre would be turned over for trial. And most importantly, the galaxy would remember what happened when someone murdered human civilians. Other alien civilizations took note. Humanity might value peace and cooperation. They might prefer diplomacy to conflict. They might show compassion and mercy. But underneath that civilization was something ancient and terrible, a capacity for focused violence that most species had evolved away from. Humans still carried it, usually controlled and restrained by ethics and law. But when someone crossed the line, when they killed human families and celebrated it, they removed those restraints. They awakened something that humans usually kept carefully hidden. They found out that humanity's compassion was not weakness. It was strength held in reserve, a choice to be civilized rather than an inability to be dangerous. The Greenbirds erected a memorial on New Sol Colony. 20 million names carved in black stone, each one representing a life stolen by Vraxel arrogance. At the base of the memorial, they placed an inscription in Korean and English and Galactic Common. They thought compassion was weakness. They learned the difference between mercy and helplessness. We are humans. We remember. We endure. We avenge. Sergeant Daeho Kim stood at his sister's name and placed white flowers at the base of the memorial. Around him, construction crews were already rebuilding the colony. Families were returning. Children were playing in new parks built on the ashes of the old ones. Life continued because that's what humans did. They survived. They rebuilt. They moved forward, but they never forgot.